Hello, hello. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to the end of 2024. I have compiled a bunch of fun reading stats for my 2024 reading. So the first half of this video will be some stats and the second half will be answering some end of the year reading questions that encapsulate my reading. I guess a 2024 year in review tag, I guess I would say. I will timestamp below, so if you're not interested in the stats, you can skip over, or if you like the stats like me, feel free to enjoy. Okay, I'm filming this on December 19th, so technically I could probably get a couple more books in this month. I should at least get one more in because I'm in the middle of an audiobook right now, and it will be due at Libby before the end of the year. But with family coming to visit, and then we'll be traveling, and just December is busy, so I don't know for sure how much I'll get in. But as of today, December 19th, 2024, I have read a grand total of 95 books. That brings me to a total of 30,958 pages read. This year in 2024, the month that I read the most was August, and I read 13 books that month. And the month I read the least was June. I got 5 books in that month. I also like to keep track of how many books I read are hard copy, audiobook, ebook, etc. So this year I read 20 audiobooks, 22 ebook or digital books, 52 hard copies, and I wrote down 2 that were a combo, meaning sometimes I'll listen to the audio and follow along. I thought that I had more than 2 that were a combo, but when I went through, I wrote down 2, so hopefully I tracked that accurately. 77 of my books were fiction and 18 were nonfiction. I read a handful of poetry books this year. I only started getting into poetry maybe last year, and I've discovered that I actually really like some forms of poetry, so I think I read at least 3 this year, maybe 4. No, I'd have to go back and look through my list. I read several memoirs that I really enjoyed. Yeah, I really enjoy reading nonfiction and interspersing it into my fiction. For a genre breakdown. So according to Storygraphs, my top 5 genres that I read this year are contemporary, romance, fantasy, literary, and thriller. And that kind of surprised me. I didn't realize that I'd read that much fantasy, but apparently I did. I have never really considered myself a fantasy person, but now that I think about it, obviously I read, Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, The Night Ends with Fire. Apparently I read more. I'm curious which books are counting. Do I just not remember, or are they counting some books that I would consider more of a different genre? They're counting it fantasy, that I hadn't thought of it that way. I don't even know, but apparently it was my 3rd top genre this year. Storygraph also tells me that my top 3 moods for my reading were emotional, reflective, and lighthearted, and I love that. I feel like that really does exemplify like the type of reading that I enjoy, because I like my reading to be something that I can think about and that I can feel things with, but I also enjoy a lighthearted read that I don't have to, I don't know, I feel like those are odd combos, but I love it. It makes me happy. Most of my books, 56 of them, were between 300 and 499 pages long. 31 books were less than 300 pages and 8 were over 500 pages. Okay, this one is fun for me. I like to keep track of where I got my books. So how many books I purchased, how many books were from the library, how many books were given to me, etc. So this year, 36 books I got from the library, 21 I got from the Libby app, which technically is still through my library, but specifically, the Libby app. 4 books I read on Project Gutenberg, which is the website for public domain books. 4 books were either given to me or lent to me. 9 books were either Kindle Unlimited or Kindle First Reads books. 19 I purchased, and that surprised me because I don't feel like I buy that many books. However, I have to say this year was one of the first years in a long time that I gave myself permission to buy a book, because usually I just don't want to spend the money or all these things. And so this year I gave myself permission to buy some books, and apparently I bought 19, so that's cool. 1 book I got from the thrift store, and 1 book was given to me for review. So factoring all of that in, here is a fun one, and I got this idea from Mimi because she always includes a stat about how much money she saved. So this year in 2024, by using the library and Libby and all of these other things, I saved a grand total of about $1,202.64, and that is cool. So as I was just kind of reflecting on my 2024 and YouTube and all these things, I think I was actually typing out a comment to Chelsea at Libraries and Lattes, and it just hit me how amazing it is that I am sitting here in my house filming this video, and I'm about to post this video online, and through YouTube, I have met these people from across the country, from around the world, that I can type messages to, and they can type comments on mine, and we can watch each other's videos and the things that we create and share and talk about books and the things that we're enjoying reading and the things that we're thinking about. And I don't know, it hit me in all of my Enneagram 4-ness to just think, wow, that's so cool. So to everybody that has made 2024 such a wonderful reading year for me and a wonderful booktube year for me, thank you so much for watching and commenting and subscribing and leaving comments. And I've so enjoyed meeting people through booktube and just talking about books. And yeah, that's really cool. And to all of you who also have booktubes, thank you for creating videos and for reading and sharing your thoughts and sharing your books and sharing your videos. I know it takes so much time and effort and energy to do, but I have so enjoyed seeing your videos too and interacting with you guys on booktube as well. Okay, moving into some questions for my year in review, starting with what were my top reads for 2024? Okay, my top reads kind of surprised me, and I don't really know. Okay, well, I do know why. Because one of my top reads, hands down, has to be Fourth Wing, and that still just surprises me because I've said it before, I read that book fully expecting to not like it. One of my friends and I refer to that as a spite read. That started out as a spite read for me because I didn't think I would like it, and I devoured it. I loved it so much. So that was a very surprising top read for me. Another top favorite is Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I have a video up on that book. So good. So good. And the other two are romances, which that kind of surprises me as well, but I don't really know why because I've read quite a few romances the last few years. So I don't really know why that surprised me. But Funny Story by Emily Henry and Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. Oh, I didn't think about The House of Mirth. Oh, I've got to do, so let's see, that's 4. I'm adding in The House of Mirth for my top 5 books of the year. Yes, absolutely. So Fourth Wing, Beartown, Funny Story, Just for the Summer, and The House of Mirth by Edith Wharton. Next question, Underdog Book of the Year. Okay, I think I'm gonna have two answers. The first one being Collected Regrets of Clover. I read this a couple months ago. I had never heard of this. I think I just saw it. Where did I hear of it? I might have just seen it on the Libby app and was intrigued by it, but I had never heard anyone else talk about it. But I really enjoyed this book. I know I talked about it in a wrap-up video, but it's such a good book. It's about someone named Clover, and she is basically a death doula, and so she is there at the end of people's lives. And she collects their memories, their regrets, things like that. She has different notebooks where she will write some of those things down. And it's specifically with the regrets, if somebody shares with her something that they regret not being able to do in life, if it's something that she's able to do, then she will do that, not on behalf of the patient, but just in memory of the person that she was with. And it was such a sweet book. It talked about a lot of things, obviously, like end of life. How do we want to live our lives? It talked about friendship, the power of being able to be real and letting people into your life. It was really good, and I haven't heard anybody else talk about that book, so I would recommend that. That was an underdog book for me this year. And the second one I would say is The Mercies, another one that I read just a couple months ago. It was on the heavier side, but that book has stuck with me. I would definitely look at some trigger warnings for it and see if it's a good book for you or a good season to read it in or whatnot. I will also link to the video where I talked more about it, but it's historical fiction, and so a lot of it is true and based on actual things that happened as far as witch hunts and the power of community and what it looks like to be a community. It was really good. And it's another one that I had never heard of until it was one of the book picks for the Ellen Made Book Club. So I don't I haven't heard anyone talk about it outside of that book club. So yeah, I would say those are 2 underdog books of the year. Next question, a book that was overhyped. Okay, let me preface by saying every book has their target audience. So just because it was overhyped for me, or just because a book didn't resonate with me, does not mean that I'm saying it's a bad book, or that nobody should like it, or that people are ridiculous for liking it. That is something that really bugs me in certain corners of the book space, reading space, is when people say that certain authors are trash or certain types of books are trash. We can have nuanced conversations because there are worthy conversations to be had about all of that. But right here, right now, I'm just saying that these books did not hit for me. And the first one that I think of is Divine Rivals, also the sequel, which I can't remember the name. Oh, Ruthless Vows. I just did not enjoy those books. And part of my problem, I believe, was that I read Divine Rivals very quickly after Fourth Wing. And Fourth Wing was a 5-star read for me. So reading a book that, in some ways, possible spoiler, in some ways this book was remarkably similar. I'll leave it at that. And so reading, I don't know, it was not as good. It definitely felt more YA to me, which Fourth Wing is YA as well. This one felt more YA. So I think if I'd read it at a different time, I might have liked it more, but especially for the timing that I read it right after Fourth Wing, it didn't hit for me. Another one was Stone Blind, which was a retelling of Medusa. And I think the reason I didn't love it was mostly just because, well, I think it was my first Greek myth retelling book that I had read. And it was not what I was expecting. So I think I just went into it expecting more about Medusa, and it didn't really actually talk a ton about Medusa herself. So that one also didn't hit for me, but I know a lot of people love it, so don't let my opinion put you off if you want to try it. And the third overhyped book was Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. I read that's the second book in the Knock 'Em Out series by her, and I have not continued the series. I can't remember if there's another 1 or 2. And this is one that I personally got a lot of red flags from some of the characters in that book. And it is definitely one that I would caution people, especially younger people reading this book, that if you have a significant other acting that way, orange to red flag, you know? So for me, that's why it was overhyped. I prefer to not have orange and red flag main characters. Obviously, nobody's perfect, but hopefully, as people, we can all learn and grow and not be domineering and controlling and rude and unkind, you know? Next question, favorite book couple. And I was torn, but I ended up going with Daphne and Miles from Funny Story. I loved them. I loved them as individuals, both of them, their personalities and who they were, and their character development, like separately on their own, and I loved them together. I thought they were so sweet. I loved the things that they kind of worked on and worked through as a couple. Yes, I really liked them. Favorite main character. This one, I thought of 4 people, but I'm gonna have to go with Benji from the Beartown series by Frederick Bachman. I have read the first 2 books in that series, and I loved him in the first book, loved him in the second book. One of the reasons that I love Frederick Bachman's writing is because of the way that he writes his characters. They're always so deep, so multifaceted, that basically every character, you can see their inner world, you can see the good parts of them, you can see the not so good parts of them. And I love Benji because he's so real. He's so kind and caring. He has a lot of crap that he's working through, but he's such a great character. I also have to mention Patroclus from A Song of Achilles. That book was one, when I closed it, like I just had to sit in the vibes of that book, and mostly because of Patroclus. I talk more about him in my book review of A Song of Achilles, but yes, he is a character that will stick with me as well. A book that surprised you. So obviously, I've already talked about Fourth Wing. That was a big surprise. I did not expect that. Another one, I'm trying to think. I think the other one that I would say was a surprise. I don't know. I don't really feel like surprised a lot, I don't feel like, with my reading. But one that did surprise me was a book that I actually read for my son, and that was A Small Zombie Problem. My son was asking for zombie books, and that's never been my go-to genre, so I did not know where to begin. So I picked this up just at the library because it was a middle grade zombie book, and it was actually really fun. I liked it. Unfortunately, my library doesn't have book 2, but at some point I would like to read it because it was fun and it was cute. So that was a surprise good read for me. New favorite author you discovered in 2024. So these authors were not they are not new authors from 2024. I just started reading them in 2024. So obviously it's gonna keep coming up. Rebecca Yarros from Fourth Wing. Nicola Moriarty, who is the sister of Leon Moriarty, who is one of my favorite authors. I read my first Nicola Moriarty book this year, and that was The Fifth Letter, and I really enjoyed that. And I would say Yung Pueblo, who is a poet. I've read 1 poetry book so far, and I would like to read more from that author. So I would go with those 3. Happiest read of the year. Okay, the thing is, I feel like obviously some books are just gonna keep coming up. I am gonna have to say my happiest read for the year, probably Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I adored that book. I liked it more than I thought I would. Okay, honestly, here's the thing. I already knew that I would love Funny Story. Well, that's not true. I was a little nervous because some of Emily Henry's books I haven't loved, but as soon as I finished Funny Story, I was like, top read, best, one of my top romances ever. So good, loved it. So when I read Just for the Summer, and I was also really adoring that, there was a part of me that just felt like I was betraying Funny Story and betraying Emily Henry. And so that has been something that I really had to work through, as funny as that sounds. But I have to say, if I had to pick a favorite between the 2 of them, Just for the Summer is a smidge over Funny Story. I really, really liked that book. It was just so good. I love the way that Abby Jimenez writes. Yes, they're sweet romances, but the characters are deep and multifaceted, and it's not just a quick, easy, happily ever after, although sometimes I enjoy those too. I really liked it. It was such a fun read, such a happy read, such a sweet read. So I would say Just for the Summer for my happiest read. My saddest read. That's a hard one to pick. Actually, it's probably not, but it is a book I've already mentioned, and that would be Beartown by Frederick Bachman. I cried in this book. It's such a good book, but it is very sad. A lot of things happen in that book that are heartbreaking and that make you feel a lot of things. Most frustrating book of the year. Okay, I have 3 books in that list, and they're all the most frustrating for the same reason. Not frustrating because I didn't like them, but frustrating because of the content. And those books, 2 of them are nonfiction, 1 is fiction. The Woman They Could Not Silence, and I just read that last month. It's in my wrap-up video. That's a book, true story, about a woman, I believe her name is Elizabeth Packard, who in the 1800s was sent to an insane asylum because her husband didn't like that she had opinions and that she used her voice to state her opinions. So she was sent to an insane asylum, a very abusive environment. And it's a book about her story and the things that she experienced, and also her fighting for herself, fighting for her kids, and fighting for changes and law reform to try to prevent this from continuing to happen. So very good book, very frustrating. So frustrating, the treatment of Elizabeth, the treatment of women in general, the treatment of people that society deemed less than, the way that the justice system was and is so messed up. Yes, very frustrating. The second most frustrating book, I would say, is A Well-Trained Wife by Tia Levings. So good. So good. It is a memoir of Tia Levings, and she talks about coming out of her cult environment, cult upbringing. She actually was part of the same cult that I grew up in, and she talks about coming out of an abusive environment, abusive marriage. Again, really good book, really good book, but frustrating that happened to her, frustrating that there are so many environments of religion and environments of control where things like this can happen. So yes, but I recommend the book. The third most frustrating book is fiction, and that is Annie Bot. It brought up a lot for me, and it made me feel a lot of things. It made me think about a lot of things. It's so good, but so frustrating. So frustrating in how real it is, even though it is a fictional book. So I would say those were my three most frustrating books of the year. Okay, the longest book I read this year was Iron Flame at 640 pages. When I was going through and like filling this out, I was surprised that it was that long. I guess I'd forgotten how long that was. The shortest book that I read this year was 35 pages, and that was Cut and Thirst by Margaret Atwood. Read that, I want to say, in the summer, maybe spring, I don't remember, but I can link to my review. It was a fun read, but it's one, I would have read a full-length book on that. It was such a fun concept and idea of these women in their older years who were talking about some of the men who had wronged them and how they were gonna handle that. It was such an interesting idea, and the things that they talked about, the ways that they worked through things. I could have read a full-length novel on that, but it was a fun short read. Favorite book covers. This is interesting because I have always felt like I'm not really like a book cover person. Like, I don't pick a book based on cover. I usually just pick based on the title and blurb if it sounds interesting. But when I was going back and just kind of looking at the covers, I was like, oh, there are some really fun covers of books that I read this year. So I would say A Well-Trained Wife. It's a very interesting cover, and I love like the wind-up part on the back. Like, it goes so well with what she's talking about. I think that's a very well done cover. The Collected Regrets of Clover is just a very beautiful cover. And again, I love the covers that give just kind of like little hints or little reflections of what the book is going to be about. Cringiest book you read this year. I don't think I want to answer this one, because when I think of books that like make me cringe, it's usually because of the author's writing, and I don't want to blast like what I perceive as a person's ability or skill level, because again, someone else might enjoy that and it might just not click for me. Anyways, I don't think I'll answer that one. Unpopular book that you loved. Okay, I put The Night Ends with Fire. I have not seen very many people who enjoyed this book, which is very interesting to me. I actually really liked this one. I liked it more than I thought that I would, and I do definitely want to read the second one. It comes out sometime in 2025. I don't know when. It's somewhat of a retelling of Mulan. I liked the way that the main character has emotions and feelings that often are not allowed main characters / allowed female main characters. I like that she was feeling things like jealousy and revenge, and you could see that she was like grappling with that. She wasn't fully all into revenge, but she wasn't fully into, I thought it was a very interesting take on some of the complexities of power dynamics and revenge and family and who am I as a person. It was very intriguing and interesting to me. But yes, I apparently am in the minority on that one, because most people that I've seen talk about this one did not like it. So, highest and lowest book you read on Goodreads, and do you agree? The book that I read that has the highest number of ratings total, not highest star rating, but just had the most people rate it on Goodreads, was The Lightning Thief at over 3 million ratings. And that it didn't surprise me in the sense that like I think it didn't deserve it. I guess I just didn't know it was that high. But as far as highest average rating, of the books that I read this year, the highest average rating on Goodreads was Fourth Wing at 4.57 stars. And I mean, I would agree with that. I gave it 5 stars for me personally. So yeah, I thought that was interesting. The runner-ups, the second highest was 4.54 stars, so close to Fourth Wing. And that was See No Stranger by Valerie Carr. Another great book, nonfiction, phenomenal. I really liked that one. It made me think a lot. So I also wanted to mention that one. And then the lowest ones. The book that I read that had the lowest number of ratings, and again, this is the lowest amount of ratings, not the lowest average star rating. So the lowest amount of ratings was Finish Your Story by Colton Iverson. That has 4 ratings. And this book is written by another booktuber that I found last year during NaNoWriMo. And he wrote a book about just some tips and tricks for how to complete your story. I would definitely recommend this one. There were a lot of tips that you would expect to see that you probably have already heard. And then there were other things that I hadn't really heard as much or talked about as much that were helpful in thinking through. So I would say if you're a writer, it's a quick read, but a good advice book for writers. But the book with the lowest average rating, so star rating, was The Other Dashwood Sister by Miranda Markwell. And on Goodreads, the average rating was 3.00 stars. And unfortunately, I do have to agree with that. I think I also gave it 3 stars. Now, keep in mind, so there's 2 versions on Goodreads. The version I read has 6 ratings total, and the other one has 52 ratings. So it's not a large sample size. So absolutely, for this one and Finish Your Story, you feel free to get a copy and boost these authors' ratings. I know I actually don't know if Miranda Markwell is a new author. I'm pretty sure she's written some other things as well. I know ratings can really help authors. So yes, feel free to read those and boost their rating numbers and or their star ratings as well. Favorite quotes of the year. I actually don't have an answer for this. I don't often track quotes, which is kind of a bummer because especially like Beartown, so many good quotes in that. The problem with Beartown specifically is like if I were keeping track of quotes, I'd be like keeping track of every sentence in that book because it's Frederick Backman. So you know that's a problem. But I discovered a long time ago that when I do write down quotes or highlight or anything, I almost never go back to look at them or read them. So yes, the bummer is they're lost. They're gone from my memory. I just have vague recollections that there were a lot of really good quotables in a book. But I also know if I did highlight or write them down somewhere, I probably would not look at them again. However, I did just start using the book app Bookly, and on that app, you can track a lot of things. It's so fun. I'm really enjoying it so far, but you can also keep track of book quotes on there. So I'm curious if I'm more likely to go back and look at quotes on there where I can easily type in the book and search and find it. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. I've only used the app for a month. So, book you would reread. I rarely reread books. I just don't usually enjoy rereading them. I'd rather read new books because there's so many books, so little time. But I definitely do think that I will be rereading Annie Bot and A Well-Trained Wife. I got both of those from the library, but I already know I want to buy my own copy and have them to keep. Those are books that I would like to read again and continue to think about. Book that made me think. Again, so many. I've mentioned all of these, I guess, before, but I've talked quite a bit about most of them. But the one that I haven't talked about as much, See No Stranger by Valerie Carr. This book was so good. The author is a Sikh activist, and she talks a lot about September 11th in the United States and the aftermath of that continuing to this day, and hate crimes and what it means to truly see people for who they are and to see no stranger and to care about those around you. It's very good, a very good book. Reading goal reflection and my 2025 reading goal. So overall, I would say my 2024 reading, I had a great reading year. I really enjoyed so many books. I feel like, some years are just phenomenal reading years and some years are not as great reading years, I guess, as far as like my average star rating, which I didn't talk about, but I do think Storygraph said my average rating was 3.99 this year. So overall, I would not say this was, as far as like star rating, it was not a phenomenal year, but I found lots of phenomenal books in my reading year, if that distinction, makes sense. But I'm very pleased with the books that I read, the amount of reading that I was able to do. Official 2025 reading goals. I know I said I was in other videos that I was still kind of trying to think about what I wanted to do. I have decided that my official 2025 reading goal is going to be 90 books on Goodreads. So I'm bringing it down from my 100. That's been my goal the last at least 4 or 5 years. I have found the last few years I've really enjoyed the challenge that 100 is usually doable, but it's still a little bit of a challenge to reach. But I'm really just feeling in 2025 more of a slower pace, and I think that that's just where I'm at. I'm excited for 2025. I'm excited for the things that the year will bring, and 90 just feels right for next year. Other specific goals, I have my 40 before 40 list. I just turned 35, so I have 5 years to complete this list. So just breaking it down, that would be at least 8 books per year. So in 2025, I'll read at least 8 books. I know I could knock out the whole list, I guess, if I wanted to in 1 year, but I really just kind of want to space it out. So we'll see. I don't have specific plans about which books I'll read in which months. I'm such a mood reader that we'll just see. But at some point in 2025, I will read 8 books off that list. I've already started Frankenstein, and I know in January I want to start Les Mis, and both of those are on that list. And those are the only concrete book-related goals that I have so far for 2025. Everything else is just kind of ideas or loose ideas, I guess, for what I'm thinking for reading next year. Mostly I'm just gonna go based on vibe, based on mood, and see what books come up. Okay, that is the end of my questions. I hope that you all have a wonderful end of December. I hope that your New year is wonderful. I hope that it's a wonderful reading year and just a wonderful year in general, and that 2025 is peaceful and life-giving and whatever you need for your 2025. And until next time, happy reading. So this year, 36 of my reads, no. Okay, let me preface, but it has a lot, ooh, I just kicked my ring light. Okay, so I categorized, no,